So guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My apologies today. I did the first video on my DJI camera and it has kicked the bucket. So I've had to send it away to get replaced or looked at. So I've no microphone today, so the sound mightn't be as good maybe as the last one. But hopefully you'll still be able to hear me and understand the gist of the video. A big thank you to everyone who watched the last one. I know it was a lot longer than what I was initially expecting, so I will try and keep this one a little bit shorter today and try and keep them in general a little bit snappier. So hopefully find this one just as insightful as the last one. If you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff, that would be much appreciated. So this week's video is going to be hopefully the last one you'll ever need to watch on the weighing scales, and hopefully after watching it you will understand why it's a good idea to weigh yourself every morning, why scale spikes are nothing to be concerned about, and I suppose why in general the weighing scales are your best friend in a fat loss phase, even though it mightn't feel like that some mornings when you're jumping on and you see maybe a similar number for the last few days in a row or a bit of a spike. So before we go into that, just a bit of a recap here. So calorie deficit equals fat loss. I think most people at this stage know that. 1 pound of body fat equals 3,500 calories. So if someone is looking to lose, say, 1 pound of body fat per week, that's typically the pace that is recommended, or that most people tend to go at. We'll take this 3,500 figure, divided by 7 days a week, that gives us 500. So let's say we take Mary here, her maintenance is 2,000 calories, and that's what the calorie calculator estimated for her. I'll leave that actually down in the description of the channel as well if you're unsure on how to find it, but they're all pretty similar. The Harrison Benedict formula seen as being the most accurate, but I'll leave it down in the description. So if Mary wants to lose 1 pound of body fat per week and her maintenance is coming up as 2,000 calories, she will need to eat 1,500 7 days a week to lose 1 pound of body fat. So if she does that 7 days a week, so Monday right through to Sunday, eats 1,500 every day, then Mary should lose 1 pound of body fat, or she should see 1 pound of fat loss occur. Can't remember what the next video or the next sheet is, but we'll go to that one next. So we've just seen there what a great week I suppose for Mary will look like if she sticks to the 1,500 7 days a week. But we know that life isn't like that, and there's going to be some weeks where things are a bit higher and all the rest. So let's say we take what Mary thinks is a bad week. So Monday and Tuesday, good days, stuck to 1,500. Maybe working late on Wednesday, ended up missing her lunch, and one reason or another ended up going over calories that day. She consumed 1,800, thinks right, I'm 300 over calories. That was a bit of a disaster, but the next day I'll get back to it. Thursday eats 1,500. Then Friday and Saturday, again, maybe wasn't as prepared as she could have been and ended up consuming more calories. Maybe invited out for dinner or last minute, whatever the case is. Consumed 1,800, and then Saturday consumed 2,000. Sunday then back to 1,500. Now it's very likely that, and I'll get to this sheet now later on, it's very likely that after eating more calories on Wednesday, Mary's scales might have been up on the Thursday, and she starts panicking, thinking, well geez, it was good there all week, and I've had one bad day and I'm up half a kilo or whatever. Same thing would have happened then likely on, say, Saturday morning, and on Sunday morning as well, after Friday and Saturday. 2 higher calorie days, might have saw a jump on the scales and thought, Jesus, I've ruined everything, that week was a disaster. But if you actually look at it, the week was still a big positive for her. We know that her maintenance is 2,000 calories, and only one day this week did she actually eat her maintenance. So as in, if she eats the 2,000 figure every day, for example, her weight will maintain. So only one day this week did she eat her maintenance. Every other day she was in a deficit. Now, she wasn't in as big a deficit as what she was in the week before, where that came to 3,500 deficit, but she's still in the deficit, and she's still in quite a decent one at that. So we know that, right, 3,500 calories roughly equals 1 pound of body fat. Yes, 2,500. Yes, she didn't quite lose a full pound of body fat this week, but she still lost, the guts of it, if you like. So that's still a positive week. Now the next week happens, and it ends up being a nightmare again for her. So Monday right through to Thursday, all good, no issues, and then maybe was away for the weekend on a hen party, whatever the case is. Things were a bit messy. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, she consumed 2,500 calories. I think, so look, I've definitely ruined this. Whatever about last week, might get away with it, but this week I've ruined it. Now again, if we punch the numbers on it, so her maintenance is 2,000 calories. So before she got to the weekend, she was in a 500, 500, 500, 500 deficit. So a 2,000 deficit, so 2,000 in the bank, if you like, before the weekend came. And yes, on each of those days, she's over her maintenance. So if her maintenance is 2,000, she's over by 500 here, here, and here. But again, if we're punching the numbers on it, she still ended the week in a weekly deficit of 500. So despite the weekend being very messy, she's waking up on Monday morning with less body fat on her frame than what she did the previous Monday. Now obviously if this is happening every week, then she's not going to make too much progress, but hopefully this reassures you that in a fat loss phase, you get away with murder every now and again. And you know, if you have the odd higher calorie day, all it's doing really is making that weekly deficit a little bit smaller. Like, you have to be doing something totally wrong to be, you know, taking yourself out of a deficit, number one, but then putting yourself into a surplus. So hopefully that reassures you that, you know, you don't need to live like a monk 7 days a week, you know, 52 weeks a year to get a fat loss result. You just have to do most things right on average, and you know, when you do that, you have the odd day, the odd week where things maybe don't go according to plan, and you're still going to, you know, likely reach your targets. So yeah, I'm going to the next sheet now. Okay, so after this sheet here, we're going to talk through why it's important to weigh yourself every day. But first of all, just to recap, I suppose, what we were saying there. So 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. Mary's maintenance we're estimating is 2,000. So for her to gain 1 pound of actual body fat in a day, now the key word here is body fat, because often people would have a, you know, a higher calorie day, they jump on the scales and it's up by a pound or it's up by 2 pounds. I think, geez, I've undone all my good work there. But there's a huge difference between weight gain and body fat gain. And if we go back to the maths on it, again, we know, right, 1 pound of actual body fat is 3,500 calories. So for Mary to gain 1 pound, or for that, sorry, 1 pound increase in the scale, for that to be body fat, what would she have had to have done mathematically? Well, we know her maintenance is 2,000. And this amount of weight she has, or this amount of calories she has to eat every day just to maintain her weight. We know that 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. So for her to gain 1 pound of body fat a day, she has to eat her maintenance of 2,000 plus 3,500. So 5,500 calories is how much Mary would have to eat in a day to gain 1 pound of body fat. So highly unlikely she's going to do this, even on the busiest of days, if you like. And then the day two, 1 pound is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but that's how difficult it is, if you like, to actually go the opposite way in a fat loss phase. Now, she's up 2 kilos. Maybe after that weekend we just showed you where Friday, Saturday and Sunday she went way over. She's up 2 kilos Monday morning and just freaking out. But again, go back to the maths on it to reassure her. 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 plus her maintenance. 2 kilos is 4.4 pounds. So to have gained 4.4 pounds of actual body fat, not scale weight, this is how much she would have to have eaten on top of her maintenance in 1 day. So that's just not going to happen. You know, that's highly unlikely that's going to happen. So yeah, hopefully this initial part of this video will reassure you that fat loss is pretty simple. It's not easy, obviously, you know, adhering to lower calories and all the rest, but it's quite simple. And if you have a few days where you go over your calorie target, there's a big difference in going over your fat loss target and actually, you know, put yourself into a surplus. So yeah, the last one now is on, I suppose, the importance of weighing in daily and what to expect. So these are Mary's initial weigh-ins. So for the first week, this is what it came up as. Now, with any client I work with, I always advise that they weigh themselves every day. And the reason I suppose we do that is that it allows us to see whether what we're doing is working or needs to be tweaked. Fat loss isn't linear, and you know, you could do everything right in a given day. You hit your calories, you hit your steps, but the scales might necessarily reflect that. And there's so many things that will come into play, and that'll be the next sheet after this. But by weighing in daily, it gives us the clearest indicator essentially of whether we're on the right track or something has to be tweaked. Whereas if you weigh in, say, once a week, like, it doesn't really tell you anything in the grand scheme of things. And actually, in my experience of working with people, I think the less frequently you weigh in, the bigger deal it creates in the person's head around it. As in, it's very sort of, you know, operation transformation, if you like, or, you know, it's right, you know, it doesn't matter what I did all week. If I'm not down on these scales on Friday morning, then the week was a disaster. When you think of that logically, like, it doesn't make sense at all. So yeah, basically weigh in daily if you're trying to lose weight. So Mary has got up first thing in the morning, went to the bathroom, jumped on the scales at the same time every day. That's important. You want the conditions to be as constant or as consistent as you can, if you like. It's easier than to, it's going to give you a more accurate read, if you like. So Monday morning, 80 kilos, stuck to the plan very well. Tuesday, she's down 79.8. Wednesday down again, but then maybe Wednesday had ate late or whatever the case is, but whatever happened, she's up on the scales and she's a wee bit worried, but this is new, so trust this man, and yeah, she cracks on. So Friday, she's down, new low, 79.4, that's great. Saturday the same, but then maybe Saturday, had a meet out, whatever the case is, and on Sunday, she is up to 80.1. Now, if we look at this first week rationally, she'll see that right, Monday morning was 80 kilos, and so far this week, I've seen that the trend is moving down in the right direction. So I hit two new lows of 79.4. So I know that, okay, it appears it's moving in the right direction. Yes, I'm not overly happy about these numbers here, but it looks pretty good. Now let's say she was only weighing in, say once per week or whatever, or twice a week. So she jumps to the scales on Monday morning, 80 kilos, and then goes, right, I'm going to get a few days under my belt first of all, and then I'll jump on midweek to see where I'm at. Jumps on Thursday. What's she going to think? But I'm after all these things he's telling me, but I've actually gained weight, so I've gone the opposite way. And then says, right, I'm going to put it in my head, I'm not going to worry about it. Doesn't weigh in on Friday or Saturday, but then jumps on Sunday and goes, right, I'm still up. That person will very likely pack it in. And naturally so, because they're not seeing progress in their eyes. The scales are actually going the opposite direction. Now, if we go on then to week 2, for example, I might pause this video, actually speed this part up. So these then are Mary's week 2 weights. So as you see, the starting weight was 80 kilos. Her lowest weight this week was 79.1. And she also had another reading in around that territory on the Friday. So we look at this, we can clearly see that, right, the trend is going in the right direction. But what you also see is loads of little spikes and loads of fluctuations. So we saw an increase, like, over the course of those 14 days, we had 1, 2, 3, 4. So we had 4 days here in this example that I gave you where scales increased, and we had, how many? 1, 2, 2 days then were it with stock. So that's basically, say, half of that 2 week period where she either woke up the following morning and saw an increase or saw no change. So as I said, fat loss isn't linear, and there's so many things that will come into play, and we'll go through that next as to why they might be sticking. But if you're not weighing in daily, you're getting less data, and as your coach, it's harder for me to make more informed decisions and to gauge, okay, whether something has to be changed or whatever. But essentially, if you're trying to be as accurate as possible and get the most insight into whether what you're doing is working or has to be changed, I would recommend weighing in daily because it gives you all this information. Now, eventually as time goes on in your fat loss phase, you will see weight loss slow down, and that'll be for another video. And that's why I suppose weighing in daily, it allows you to maybe see that trend and see, okay, the rate of loss has started to slow for me a wee bit here. So maybe that's a sign that I have to, adjust something on the plan, so either reduce calories further, increase activity. But as I said, I'll save that for next video. I don't want this one to be any longer than the last one. So yeah, make sure you weigh in every day, guys. Make sure you take your average, assess the trend, ignore the daily spikes and daily fluctuations, focus on the trend, and you will be in a good spot. Okay, so this is the last sheet today. So why the scales stick. So as I said, fat loss isn't linear. There will be spikes, there will be peaks and troughs. It's all part of the process. And I think you always have to remember that when you're jumping on the scales every morning, it's not just measuring your body fat on that given day. It's measuring your muscle mass, water weight, food volume. There's a lot of other things that are coming into play there. So some of the things that can impact the scales: eating out. Anytime you go to a restaurant, whether that's for a lunch or a dinner, anytime you have a takeaway, there's a very high likelihood that you would see a spike the following morning. Now that's not you being punished for having, a burger and chip, whatever. That's just the water retention that's coming off the extra salt that chefs typically put into the meals there. So yeah, extra salt. So maybe it wasn't a meal out, but maybe you had, a ready meal, or you had, a certain meat that was higher in salt. Scales up the following day. That's all it is, a wee bit of water retention. You ate later, so maybe you normally have your last meal at 7 o'clock and maybe you were late come home from work, whatever, on this particular evening, didn't get into the 9:30, the time you're jumping the scales the following morning, there's more food volume in your stomach than there usually is, so that can skew it. And that's why I said at the start of the video, it's important that you keep the conditions consistent the whole way through by weighing in at similar times every morning. Stress. So if you are stressed, it doesn't have an impact on your metabolic rate. You're not gonna, it's not gonna have an impact on that, but it might have an impact on the scales, because again, you might be holding on to more water. Time of month. So if you are a female, you will likely see more scale fluctuations than the lads. And during that week of your period, you can really disregard what the scales are saying, because it's not going to be telling the true story. Now, I still would recommend that my female clients would weigh in. And yes, it might be uncomfortable seeing the increase in the scale and feeling, well, geez, I'm doing everything right now, but the scales are up this week. But it's good data to have then for the following month, where again the same thing will happen, where time of the month will come, scales would jump, but at least then you'll be able to look back and go, well, actually this time last month and the month before that and the month before that, the same thing happened. It stuck or it spiked for a few days, but then a few days after it settled down again and returned back to baseline. It's time of the month, and I've just started this one here because it's a little bit different. Dehydration. If you are dehydrated, you might find that the scales are actually lower the following day. Now, if you say go out for a few drinks, you might find the next day you're lighter on the scale. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean that there's fat loss properties in alcohol. It just means that you're a little bit dehydrated, and that's why the scales might be down a wee bit. But they're all things that will impact what the scales, they're all things that will impact the scales in the short term. In the long term, they don't have an impact. If you can munch within your calories, over time you lose weight, but in the short term, these can affect it. But in summary, this is the line I always want you to think about. The drop always comes. No one is the exception to thermodynamics. Like there's no one out there that calorie deficits don't apply to. Yes, there's people who have, different metabolic rates and a different maintenance calories. Not everyone's maintenance calories are going to be the same, obviously. But the drop always comes. If you're being truly consistent, you will get the results you're after. And yeah, just always keep this in mind. Always, trust the process, even though it might be difficult on those mornings where you see it increasing. Trust in what you're doing. And yeah, you will undoubtedly get the results you're after. So yeah, hopefully you found this presentation somewhat insightful. If you did, as always, if you could like the video, share with your friends, family, anyone who might find it useful, that'd be much appreciated. If you could subscribe to the channel too. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.